I've been studying some manifestation ideas and neuroscience and several authors, and started having some ideas about the subject that I wanted to share. Maybe it's useful for someone. Um, so, some of the things that I've been thinking about recently, the whole idea of like Neville Goddard that talks about how the world is you pushed out. There's a correspondence with the idea that you can only have an experience outside of yourself if there's some sort of representation of that inside of your neurology, your brain, or whatever. Um, it's like if you notice that there's a chair outside of you, you only know that that's a chair if there's some sort of representation inside of your mind that labels that experience that you have um, with your sensory apparatus, that okay, that indeed is a chair, right? And then you label it that way because that's what you learned. You learned that that grouping, that sensorial group, that so what's the German word for it? That Gestalt, maybe. That represents the experience of a chair. So you recognize that, and the brain is also a pattern matching machine, right? We love patterns. Brain loves patterns. So it's like that's why games like Candy Crush Saga or any kind of pattern matching game, that's why they're so popular and they're so addictive, because our brain loves to find correspondences with what's inside, outside. I found a match. I found a match. And that happens. You get a good feeling. It's addictive. You have that good feeling and that addictive feeling even when it's a bad pattern, even when it's something, and that's probably, you can probably connect that idea with survival, because it's the brain's survival mechanism scans the environment for threats, and basically scanning the environment for patterns that suggest that you're in danger somehow, that you can be hurt or killed or whatever. So you join the two ideas. It's like, okay, you have the pattern matching thing, you found a pattern, oh, that's good. And you find something in your environment that represents danger. And there is a tendency, there's a bias towards that negative part, because survival obviously is very important. So you tend to focus on the negative as an evolutionary strategy. You search for patterns. You project the patterns that you have inside of you. You can't have an experience of something outside of you unless it's represented somehow inside of you. So that leads to the conclusion that there's a lot of things that you might be projecting onto the world as threats, especially in relation to other people. It's like you create this idea of a person because they have hurt you in the past, or they have done something to you that you consider a threat. It gives you or gave you negative feelings. You labeled that set of circumstances related to that person as a threat, and that's a pattern that's inside of you. And then you start, the more you repeat that, the more you see that outside of you. You can see just a small part of the pattern and then connect the rest. And psychology has studied this. I don't remember the term, but anyway, you see a small part and then you connect the rest. It's also in Gestalt, I think. So eventually what happens is you label that person as a threat because they hurt you somehow, or the situation, or whatever it is. You see a small part of it, it sets off the rest of the pattern, which wasn't necessarily there. It's inside of you. Being inside of you, you project it. You see it outside of you. So it's like you experience it again, and then you just keep reinforcing it. So every time you bring back the hurt and the pain and whatever, you're reconfiguring that person or that experience or whatever it is to be a threat, to be negative, to be whatever it is, So these are just some ideas that I've been playing around with. You have the reticular activating system, which scans for patterns depending on your mood, your mental context. It's like, okay, I'm thinking about red cars, and then you go out in the streets, start seeing red cars all over the place. They were already there, but You just start seeing them more because your reticular activating system directs your awareness. Also, another way to think of it is, the whole thing about your awareness generates your reality, because the world outside is not what you think it is. It's a hallucination of the world outside that we see, that we perceive, and that we live is a hallucination made by our brains. We're trying to make sense of a bunch of stimuli, right? Like an enormous amount of stimuli. You have to label it somehow. You have to have some sort of a map that you follow so that you know where to go and what to do. And it's never going to be 100% accurate. It's always going to be leaving something out. It's always going to be distorted somehow. So that's why, the whole idea of reality is an illusion, and we project ourselves onto our world much more than we tend to think, because we have, like Einstein said, reality is an illusion, but it's a very persistent one. Yes. I think we have a lot more control over, this is getting more into the more esoteric part of it, because it's like how you can alter the world around you with your thoughts and with your concept of the world, because your concept of the world translates directly into your experience of the world. So, logically, you would conclude that your concept of the world changes the world. So, basically, that would be my thoughts on the subject at the moment. I hope this helps. Just thinking about how, something to keep in mind, it's like, okay, if you're having a bad experience with something, that's your mental model of the thing. But then someone hurt me, someone did this, someone did that. Well, work on your mental model of the thing, because things and people and whatever, the world is super complex. There are like a gazillion different configurations of things. And in order for us to deal with the world, like I mentioned just now, we have to simplify it so that we can work on it. We can have something to deal with. You're not going to handle a gazillion amount of inputs at any given time. You're going to have to simplify it. You're going to have to bring it down, and then that's necessarily going to distort your reality. So you're not dealing with reality the way it is. You're not dealing with people the way they are. You're not dealing with situations the way they are. Everything is way more complex than what you can actually understand and handle. So work on your mental model. And that's what all the manifestation thing is all about. I saw an author the other day saying that self-help is basically learning how to direct your reticular activating system. And that's a great explanation for it too, because it's like, where is your awareness? It's all about where your awareness is. And that ties in pretty well with the whole idea of mindfulness. It's like, the only thing that exists is the present moment. You now, here. Everything else is also just, you're bringing back patterns from the past, things that happened to you, and they're represented somehow in your brain, like circuits, neurological circuits, however it is that it physically plays out. But anyway, structurally, there is something in your brain that represents that past configuration, and it's a configuration it's a toned down and simplified configuration. It's not the truth. What you remember about the past, what you see now, is not the truth. And whatever it is that you think about the future is not the truth either. So that's what you have to work on. You have to work on your internal representation of whatever it is that you're dealing with. So if it's like it's in the past, it's something that makes you upset. Somebody did something to me, it made me upset. If it's still upsetting you, you're bringing back a representation of it that makes you upset. It leads to that feeling. And it's not necessarily true. You don't have to bring it back that way. If the more you keep bringing it back that way, and that's one of the problems with traditional therapy. Therapy is wonderful. I do therapy. I love it. It gives you the opportunity to really, be introspective and have someone call you out on patterns that you're not noticing and so on. But there is one thing that I think that a lot of people criticize, that I tend to agree with, is that if you keep rehashing the old patterns without actually this point of view that's not the only way that you can see that, If you keep bringing them back and hoping that just bringing them back and reviewing them over and over again will bring you some sort of enlightenment, you're wrong. You're just reinforcing them. So, and it makes things worse. It just consolidates it more. You need to alter the patterns that create the problems, because if you have a specific pattern that generates a specific feeling inside of you, that pattern, every time it's repeated, is going to generate the same feeling. You have to change that, right? If you want different results, you need to take different actions, right? So you have to work on the mental models of things that you want to alter in your outside world. That's the only way that you're going to see change in the world outside of you. You alter the mental models, that changes how you interact with the world, because it's not just like, oh, I'm going to think of a Ferrari and I'm going to magically, one is going to pop up. Why do people think that? Because when you change the way you are, your mental representation of something, it alters the way you act. It alters the way you interact with the world in subtle ways. If you start acting like the person who has that result, you will act differently, and you probably won't even notice it. It's the difference between, that's why a lot of these manifestation channels and content, they talk about not putting effort into something. If you put effort into something, it means you're going against somehow you're trying to act in a way that's not congruent with who you are inside. And that's not sustainable, and that's the whole thing. You have to put so much effort into it, and sometimes that's all you have. That's fine. It's not like, oh, I'm never going to have any effort in my life. I'm just going to make everything easy. Sometimes that's all you have. It's like, I do not have a mental model for this. I don't have a way to imagine how this is going to be. I don't know how to study. I don't know how to become a person who studies more. So you put in some effort. You go against your current reality or personality, and you keep insisting on it with discipline and everything else until you actually change. That's not the best way to do it, but sometimes it's the only option you have. So you shouldn't discard it. You shouldn't just go, oh yeah, I'm not going to put in the effort or anything. No. But it's not the smartest way to do it. The smartest way to do it is to figure out what that kind of person is that gets that result. A lot of people talk about this. And incorporate that. Have that as your core. Having that as your core will lead you you have to be congruent. Otherwise it's going to be jarring. It's going to be like, I don't feel good about doing this. And that's why the whole effort, putting in effort when you're not in that state, is not always sustainable, because you're going to be acting against your nature, and your mind is going to go, wait, we're not supposed to act this way. We're supposed to be something else. You're not supposed to be doing this. It doesn't feel good. Well, you become the person first. You work on the core. It's like the good analogy that I like to use. It's like the grain of sand inside the oyster. The grain of sand inside the oyster starts out very little, and then it starts getting covered, and becomes a pearl, right? So it's like this core that will eventually, expand and become something more. It becomes the whole thing, right? You start acting in that way. It feels good. It feels congruent. It feels like that's what you're supposed to be doing. And sometimes you don't even notice. A slight change in your tone of voice. I don't know. Just so many things. Just you open the door just a little bit differently, and somebody else sees it, and unconsciously they react to it a different way. And then they I don't know, they sense in you some sort of confidence. I'm just making this up, but it's like that would be the mechanism. It would be, that's why it looks like it's so energy and esoteric and all that stuff. But there's a way for you to think of it. There's a model that you can use that's more connected to, I think, mainstream science and mainstream scientific thinking and psychology. So you have all these micro movements, all these micro actions and behaviors that you don't even notice, but they are congruent with how you accepted now yourself to be. And then once you get into that mode of being, once you get into that mental context of I am this way, my identity, you start acting in that way, you don't even notice, and your results start to change. And since it seems like you're not doing anything, it seems like things are magically changing, but they're not magically changing, because everything is obviously connected. It's like, it's not even you know, like I said, esoteric or whatever. Everything is connected. You're not disconnected from anything. You know, you see the whole butterfly effect thing is not crazy. It's actually true. If you move your arm like this, you're moving the wind, and it, you know, it shakes a leaf on the tree, and then some bird that's on the leaf is going to fly away, and then it's going to hit, you know, another bird, and then they're going to fall and whatever. There's a whole chain of events that you have no idea that you're influencing, and you're part of. You're part of the pattern. So that goes back to the whole, you know, how your mental model is influencing everything. You're part of the mental model. If you have a problem with someone or something, the way you see it and the way you are is part of the problem. It's directly connected to the problem. It's not like, oh, you know, it's not supposed to be like beating yourself up. It's supposed to be empowering. If you have a problem with someone, you see them as, I don't know, someone who hurt you, whatever, you know? My battery's about to run out. I have to finish this rant. You're part of the pattern in them. Your pattern sets off patterns in them that create the problem back to you. So if you the only thing you can do is change yourself. You can't actually alter the other person. That would be manipulative, and it doesn't really work. The only thing you can do is change yourself. So that's just some thoughts.